Hi, we're Shannon and Jerry Arner.
And our dog, Betty White.
Your hosts of the Arner Adventures podcast.
Could we have named it something more creative? Probably. But it's the name of our blog. It's our last name. We're on an adventure. Yada, yada, yada. After owning our own business, working 24/7.
And don't forget a mental breakdown in between.
We made a lifestyle change and decided to make the most out of life.
We sold our house, most of our belongings, downsized, and moved to the coast.
We live life minimally, but fully.
We live each day as an adventure.
This show will help you learn how to live life more fully, with more intention, by experiencing more, and with less stuff.
We'll talk about our own experiences, interview others who have much to share by creating a spark in our lives.
Some days we'll share real-life ongoings of what we're going through, and others will talk about our favorite flavor of waffle.
Come join our adventure.
It's the Arner Adventures Podcast.
Hello, everyone. I'm Shannon.
And I'm Jerry.
Our pup, Betty White, says hello, and we are back for episode 52 of the Arner Adventures Podcast.
Today, we have a Spark in Our Lives episode who is just so motivating. He even has a blog called Motivational Check. But before we get into detail about our guest, let's get to our review of the week.
Today's review comes from Marsa GPS. Marsa says, absolutely one of the best podcasts in my rotation. Inspiring guests, hosts, and even the occasional chat with their dog, Betty White. Highly recommend.
Wow, Marsa.
That's so nice, Marsa GPS.
Marsa GPS. That's a good name, too. Right? We haven't had a GPS in here before.
That's true.
That's pretty cool. But sort of reviews always make us feel so good about what we're doing and keep us motivated. So thank you.
Yep. So if you would like to give us a huge boost of inspiration like Marsa did, head over to lovethepodcast.com/Arner Adventures and give us a review or rating. It means so much to us to hear that we're providing content that you all enjoy.
Well, you know what I enjoyed? The conversation with today's guest.
Nice segue.
Thank you. Thank you, darling. Our guest is Terry Tucker. Terry's story is one of resilience, and we dig into his motivation and the mindset of what keeps him going through adversity. What a story.
Well, are you ready to get to the conversation?
Heck yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Well, we have been counting down the days until we could chat with today's guest. We are so excited to welcome Terry Tucker to the podcast. Terry Tucker is a motivational speaker, author, and international podcast guest on the topics of motivation, mindset, and self-development. He has a business administration degree from the Citadel, where he played NCAA Division I college basketball, and a master's degree from Boston University. In his professional career, Terry has been a marketing executive, a hospital administrator, a SWAT Team Hostage Negotiator. That is interesting. A high school basketball coach, a business owner, a motivational speaker, and for the past 10 years, a cancer warrior. Terry has been featured in Authority, Thrive Global, and Human Capital Leadership magazines. Did I mention how excited we are to have him here? Welcome, Terry, to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here and taking your time to join us.
Well, Shannon, Jerry, I'm really looking forward to talking with you today. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Well, we like to get a picture of, where you are. So where are you coming to us from today?
Denver, Colorado.
Oh, okay. What's the weather like there?
It's beautiful. The trees are turning, and it's a little cool in the morning, but we've still been in the 70s and the 80s. So we can't complain.
I bet it's a beautiful time of year to be there.
It really is.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Neato.
Well, gosh, you have such an impressive story, an inspirational story. We talked a little bit before we started recording about how everyone who is on our podcast, we talk about them being a spark in our lives, because they are, and you are. And we were talking before that we don't know how we would overcome certain things. I guess you don't really know until you're there. And I just think that your story is so inspirational, and I can't wait to dig into it and just kind of talk about your journey. The first thing I want to talk about is the many hats that you've worn in your life, and especially the hostage negotiator. I mean,
what that one kind of stands out.
Yeah. And of course, your basketball career, your coaching, and all of that. What was your first role? And then how did your career path change sort of over time?
Sure. So when I graduated from the Citadel, I'm really going to date myself now, but this was long before the internet was available to help
Uh-huh.
people find jobs. So I moved home to find a job after I graduated. I was the first person in my family to graduate from college. So, I was all set to make my mark on the world with my newly obtained business administration degree. And I look back now and realize how little I knew about business just because I had a degree. But fortunately, I was able to find that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their
Yep.
marketing department. So that was my first shot at working after college.
Oh,
Wow.
wow. Were
Okay.
you behind the "Where's the beef" thing?
I was there when Where's the Beef was going on. Little Clara Peller, who, it was funny. I mean, she was like an 80-year-old retired beautician and
Oh.
who decided to, get her Screen Actors Guild card and stuff like that. And, it was so much fun because that phrase, Where's the Beef, permeated politics. Everywhere you went, people were saying, Where's the beef? So it was a lot of fun to be at Wendy's during that time.
I bet.
I remember my grandma having this I don't know if it was a reusable grocery bag or just like a cloth bag that the side of it said, "Where's the beef?"
Yeah.
And I just thought that was the funniest thing.
It's one of the biggest catchphrases of all time. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
we're still talking about 30 years later, 35 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the marketing people, the advertising people, I mean, they won Clios, which are kind of like Academy Awards for advertising, and they had them prominently displayed, in the department and stuff like that. It's pretty neat.
That is neat.
Did you feel intimidated being there when they had sort of come up with this huge marketing campaign, or were you just kind of excited to be a part of it?
At the time, I was in field marketing when I started as a trainee. Trainee, literally, I was making copies, gassing up company cars and, running and getting lunch. That was the extent of, using my college degree to its fullest. And, so I had moved to new product marketing, which was a lot better. I put on a few pounds because I was always taste testing things like that. So, but yeah, it was just fun to be in the organization because it was growing, it was developing, it was innovating. And just to be there, I learned quite a bit when I was there.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I bet.
Yeah, that was one of my first favorite fast food chains when I was a kid, I think.
Yeah.
I was going to say Dave Thomas, who started Wendy's, was just an interesting guy. I mean, he was an orphan. He named Wendy's after his daughter. His daughter's name was Melinda Lou, but nobody could say Melinda Lou, so her nickname was Wendy. And so that's how Wendy's got its name.
Well, I didn't know that. I knew it was after his daughter, but I didn't know about the Melinda Lou.
Yeah.
Huh. You learn something new every day.
You did, yeah. I didn't know that either. That's cool.
So well, gosh, I want to know how let's talk about the hostage negotiator. So how did you get to that role?
Yeah, that was kind of an interesting journey. Usually your next door neighbor is not a hostage negotiator. So, it was something that I always wanted to do. My grandfather was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954. So he was in Chicago during Prohibition when alcohol was outlawed, during the Great Depression in the late 1920s, early 1930s, and when the gangs, Al Capone and those guys were shooting up the town. And he was actually shot in the line of duty with his own gun. It was not a serious injury. He was shot in the ankle, taking a homicide suspect back to the lockup. But my dad always remembered the stories. My dad was an infant at the time that my grandmother told of that knock on the door. Mrs. Tucker, grab your son, come with us. Your husband's been shot. So when I expressed an interest in going into law enforcement, my dad was absolutely not. You're going to go to college. You're going to major in business. You're going to get out, get a great job, get married, have 2.4 kids, and live happily ever after.
Of course.
But that's what my dad wanted me to do. And when I graduated from the Citadel and moved home to find a job, my father was dying of cancer. So was my grandmother. And so I had a choice to make. I could either say, sorry, Dad, you know what? I'm going to go blaze my own trail and go into law enforcement, or out of love and respect for you, I will do what you want me to do. So my resume makes a little more sense if you understand sort of that backstory. So my first two jobs, healthcare administration and Wendy's, were because that's what my dad wanted me to do. And I sort of joke, I did what every good son did. I waited till my father passed away. And then I got into law enforcement. but I was old. I mean, I was a 37-year-old rookie police officer. I remember I took a whole lot more Tylenol in the police academy than the younger recruits did and things like that. But that was the start of what I felt was my passion. And that led to, for about 5 years, I ran a beat in a marked car in uniform. And then I know you're going to laugh at this because I'm 6'8" and I never changed my appearance. I was an undercover drug cop. So I would buy drugs and stuff like that. And I also got on to the SWAT team as a negotiator, which was an absolute blast. And if you want me to tell you some stories, I can do that as well.
No, tell us one of those stories.
I'll give you two real kind of quick ones.
Okay.
One was, this was totally atypical, totally not the way it went. This individual had barricaded himself in the house with his wife and a gun. So listen up to this, Jerry. All right. So the way this works, and so I was working that night. I got on scene pretty quickly, and I'm talking to the uniform officers. I'm like, what's the deal? It's like, he's drunk. He's taking his wife hostage, and he has a gun. So do you have him on the phone? Yeah. So I took over talking to him on the phone. And usually in negotiations, you do not initially talk about coming out. You have to develop trust. It's just like a relationship, husband, wife, parent, child, boss, subordinate. You have to develop that trust. But I just kind of had a feeling when I was talking to him. So I said to him, what would it take for you to come out? And there was this long pause, and he said, give me a beer. I was like, do I have your word? If I gave you a beer, you would let your wife go and you would come out? He said, do I have your word I could drink it? I said, you have my word. So I gave $5 to one of the officers, sent him down to the store. They got a beer. The tactical team put it on the front porch. I called them back. I said, your beer's on the front porch, but you don't get it until your wife comes out. You put the gun down. You come out with your hands up. All of a sudden, the front door flies open. Here comes his wife. Here he comes with his hands up. We handcuff him, let him drink his beer, and off to jail he goes. So,
When we downsized and moved to our coastal bungalow, we knew what we wanted as far as a beachy coastal vibe aesthetic. If you're someone who follows our blog, you've seen me mention the book Surf Shack, Laid Back Living by the Water. I love it. I love the lifestyle, the whole surfer beach bungalow look. Even though we aren't surfers, we still want that sort of feel in our home. Laid back, casual, but also really cute. In comes Havenly. Havenly allows you to use the services of a professional designer virtually. After taking the Havenly design quiz, I was perfectly matched with my designer, Alyssa. Alyssa had experience with pet-friendly homes, small homes, coastal vibe aesthetic. She was able to extract my ideas that were living inside my brain and put them into her design magic skills to cultivate exactly what we envisioned. Check out the before and after on our website, arneradventures.com/Havenly. That's Havenly. Alyssa just got it. She put together idea boards. I got to choose. We conversed back and forth. We even had a virtual call. It was just so easy. She was a real person, not some, robot thing, the algorithm that they just matched us together. Alyssa's a person, and she really did get it. Our space is wonderful. It's such an easy process. They have various packages that you can do for your living room, or you can do your kitchen or bathroom, or even a podcast room. They will match you with someone who can help you design that. If you would like to try Havenly, and I suggest that you do, go to their website, havenly.com, or you can use all the links down in the show notes, but use code ARNER25, that's ARNER 25, and receive 25% off of your design package. What a deal. You're just going to love it. Now let's get back to the show. Okay, the question here is, what kind of beer was it?
Budweiser.
Okay, that was inspirational.
I don't think he would have cared. In all honesty, I think he was just, give me a beer. I know I'm going to jail. So, that was atypical. And this story is a little more tragic, but it kind of gives you an idea of some of the goofy stuff we had to deal with. This individual wanted to commit suicide, and he started probably 8:00 at night. He slit his wrists, and that didn't work. And then he got the brilliant idea that turning his gas on in the oven and sticking his head in it would somehow kill him. Well, it didn't, and that didn't work. And then he calls a relative, and the relative called the police, and we get there. We're talking with him. He's got a gun now. He's going to shoot himself. And it's probably 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And he says to me, I really want to come out. And I'm like, good. I think you should. I said, put the gun down, take the phone with you. I said, here's what's going to happen when you come out. When you do, I'll come down to the scene and we'll talk face to face. He's like, I really like that. Well, he hangs up the phone, which is not uncommon because we're conditioned that when a call's over, we normally hang up the phone.
Sure.
But then about 30 seconds later, one of the tactical officers comes on the radio and said, we heard a gunshot. And I thought, you did not shoot yourself. He did. Shot himself in the head, but he shot himself at such an angle where the bullet went underneath his skin, right here at his temple, went around his skull and came out the other side. Never penetrated his skull, never got to his brain. So that's 3 times he tried to kill himself. And I think that was God's way of saying, nope, we don't want you up here right now. So he just ended up going to the hospital.
Are you telling me the skin contained the bullet so it went all the way around his head?
Yeah, he shot himself at such an angle that it just went around and came out the other side of his temple.
You couldn't do that if you tried to do that.
No, you couldn't. You couldn't.
Wow.
Oh my.
Yeah, it was pretty. I mean, it was really bloody because any kind of head wound is really, bleeds a lot. But in terms of severity, I mean, I think he was overnight in the hospital just for precautions and then ended up going to jail. They just stitched up his 2 wounds and that was it.
Wow. Hopefully he got some mental health treatment and is still alive today. But goodness.
Yeah.
That one's amazing.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine that.
That's one for truth is stranger than fiction.
Right. Right. We've been, he's saying that. And as you're talking about this whole experience, we can't help but think about, we've been watching the Dahmer series and we just finished it.
Yeah.
And we were just saying this morning that you could not write that.
Yeah.
You couldn't write that whole story. I mean, I don't care who you are.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that you experienced so many things that you couldn't write. That's just,
Yeah. I mean, some of the things that you see, I think any first responder, are not things that you want to see. They're certainly not things you should see. And I can certainly understand why a lot of people develop, post-traumatic stress disorder and things like that. It's just, you see the worst of humanity. You see helplessness and hopelessness. And that, it's kind of like putting your finger in the dike. There's nothing I can stop this one, but the leak's going to come over here, and you do the best you can and take it personally.
So how did you then because you were in the field that you wanted to be in. So then how did you end up transitioning to be a basketball coach?
Yeah. So my wife has always been the primary breadwinner in our family. And she lost her job. When I was a police officer, I was in Cincinnati, Ohio, and she lost her job and ended up finding another job in Texas. So we had to move. And, when she married me, I was a suit and tie, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday hospital administrator. So you can imagine, we're married and I'm like, hey, hon, I'd like to do a major pivot in my life and work nights and get shot at and do all this other kind of fun stuff. You okay with that? And she was incredibly supportive of me. So when it came time for her to need my support, I needed to move on. And I was not my job. I'll be honest with you. There were people that I worked with that had been cops for 30, 40 years and couldn't retire because their whole identity was tied to what they did for a living. That I loved what I did. I felt it was my passion, but it wasn't who I was. And so it was a matter of, okay, I can do some other things. And I did. And that really, we have one child who's a daughter. She fortunately or unfortunately got my height. And so I was able to coach her in high school basketball. But you got to understand, I grew up with brothers. I went to an all-male Catholic high school. The Citadel at the time I was there was all male. Yeah. So to coach girls was certainly a growing experience for me.
Oh gosh, I love that you said your job was not your identity. I feel like we talk about that a lot on here. Yeah,
that really rang a bell with us.
Yeah. When someone asked, what do you do? I get really annoyed by that question these days. Because I do think all of us, we are all so much more than what we do. And I feel like that's just the question people ask, and that's what they want to know. And then that's it. They just don't want to know anything else instead of saying, well, tell me about your life. Tell me, what you enjoy. So I think that the conversation needs to change all around instead of that.
That's a very surface level thing. Yeah. We like to go a little deeper, I think.
Yeah. Well, and I'm the same way with you. It's like, I don't really care what you do for a living. I always ask, what do you do when you're not working?
Yeah.
That's kind of, I think, a better question. And people sort of gravitate, I like to sail, or I like to write, or, whatever it is they end up doing.
Yeah. And
it tells you more about the person right off, a lot more than usually.
It's much more interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. A hostage negotiator is pretty interesting.
Yeah. Not many people do that as their hobby.
Yeah, that's true.
True.
So out of all of the roles that you have had as far as jobs, was there one that you just did not like, or were you always pretty content with those roles?
I mean, I was always restless when I was in business. When I worked for Wendy's in the hospital, it was like, yes, I'm learning things. Yes, I'm around great people. Yes, I'm improving my life. And that was great when I became a cop, because I had some life experience that I was able to bring to the job. But I was always restless with it. It was like, this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be doing this over here. And, obviously it took quite a while after I graduated from college. I mean, almost, 17 years before I actually got to the point where I was sort of living my dream. Being an author was certainly an interesting experience. I enjoyed being a high school basketball coach, but coaching girls was entirely foreign to me, because girls compete. I mean, girls are very competitive, but girls compete for the camaraderie and the relationships that they develop. Boys or guys don't. I mean, if they like you, they like you, but we're on the same team together. Fine. It's all for the good of the team, but it's just a different dynamic. And I'll give you a quick story. One day we were in the middle of a game, and I pointed to one of the players on the bench, and I'm like, go in for so-and-so. And, she nods her head, and I go back to pretend, and, I'm trying to coach. And I look over at sort of out of the corner of my mouth, the scores, or a corner of my eye at the scores table, and there's nobody there. So I turn back to her, and I'm like, get in the game. She yeses me again. And, I turn back around and I look again, there's nobody there. So I call her to me, and I'm like, look, I need you in the game. All of a sudden the tears start coming down, and I'm like, oh my God, we're in the middle of a game. I can't have a counseling session here. What's wrong? I don't want to go in the game. What? You work all week in practice. You make yourself and your teammates better. The reward is to play in the game. What do you mean you don't want to go in the game? I don't want to go in the game. Why? I might make a mistake, and my friends in the stands will laugh at me. I'm like, well, what about your responsibility to the teammates that you work every day? I'm like, I can't believe I'm having a counseling session in the middle of a game. I played basketball up until I was 21. The game was the reward for all your work and practice. But for this player, eventually she went into the game, but it was just like, oh my gosh,
like, there's no crying in basketball.
That's right. There's no crying in baseball. There's no crying in basketball either.
That's a good story.
I played softball all through, I don't know, since I was younger, all the way through high school and a little bit after high school into college. And all but one of my coaches were male. And I can see exactly what the conversation you were having. I feel like they all had to have.
Oh, yeah.
Some of us were crying at different times. And I know they were just like, oh, my God, how am I dealing with this?
Oh, yeah. You'd be on the bus, and they'd be talking about, the latest whatever show they were watching, and this guy. I'm like, come on, we got to focus. We're getting ready to play a game. We're not playing. We'll focus when we get there. We got to talk about what Brock is doing to Leslie here or something,
Oh gosh, that's so funny.
That is funny.
Okay, so you brought up the books, which I definitely want to talk about. But my question first, because I'm wondering, did you start writing prior to your cancer journey, or was it after?
I've always enjoyed, English was kind of one of my better subjects. I was not great at math and science. So English writing, when I was a freshman in high school, I was at a Catholic school. I had to take Latin, and Latin certainly helped me be better at English and better at writing. So I've always been interested in reading and writing. My roommate in college was an English major, but I had started when I was a police officer. I used to write and I never gave them to her, but I would write letters to my daughter just in case something happened to me. And, here's what it was like when I was growing up. Here are things I want you to know and stuff like that. And that ended up being like 400 pages. So I'm going to give that to her one day and say, here, whatever you want to do with this, you want to publish it. You want to just keep it for yourself. That's fine. I had written about my cancer journey, but to actually publish a book, to go down that route, that was an entirely foreign thing that I had no idea what I was doing.
Okay. Because where I'm getting to is I didn't know. I mean, you sound like you've always been maybe a positive guy, but I'm wondering, and we'll get into that conversation now, is about okay, so you were diagnosed with a rare form of cancer and you've gone through tons of treatment, and I would, if you don't mind talking about that a little bit. And the reason I'm getting to this about the books is I'm wondering, did that journey and everything you went through with cancer, and that you're still on that journey, did that change your mindset? Or have you always been this really motivational guy and we're ready to write these books that we're going to inspire people? Or, or did that happen because of the cancer journey?
I think my mindset got honed through my cancer journey. I think growing up in Chicago, I played basketball in the same conference with a guy by the name of Isaiah Thomas. Isaiah Thomas went on to play at the University of Indiana for Bobby Knight, won a national championship, was drafted in the NBA, won a couple NBA championships with the Pistons. And so we would see each other in the summer when we would come home from school. And I mean, obviously he's playing at Indiana, I'm playing at the Citadel. I mean, they're two entirely different worlds there. But we would talk about Knight because, Bobby Knight was kind of the premier coach at the time. Yeah. And I said, what's Knight like? And he said, Knight's got this interesting quote. He said, mental is to physical as 4 is to 1. So here's this great elite coach teaching, premier athletes how to use their bodies to be great basketball players on the court. But what he was really saying with that quote is that your mind or your mindset is 4 times more important than anything your physical body is going to do. So, it was pretty early on in my life that I learned the importance of having a positive mindset to get you to where you want to be. Now, you got to have all kinds of other things with it, but that's a start. And then I think you have to have good habits and you have to have the discipline to implement those habits. So if you've got motivation, discipline, and good habits, I think you can pretty much be successful. The problem with most of us is we're kind of lacking in usually one of those areas.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm a big Duke fan. And so I a big Coach K fan, and his leadership whole model is also about that too. And I'm sure he got it.
Well, he got
from
it
Bobby Knight.
from Bobby Knight because he worked under Bobby Knight.
Yeah. So
well, I'll give you a quick story. When I was in high school, Coach K came to my house and recruited me to play for him at Army. And I was the idiot that said no. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I got chills on my arms.
Wow.
What?
Yeah, it was pretty. I mean, you knew the guy was special even back then, even when he was coaching.
Really?
At this point. So.
You know what I've realized?
What's that, Jer?
People think that when the temperatures cool down that you don't need to drink as much water.
Dehydration can happen any time of year. Drinking water is important year-round.
It's easy to stay hydrated with Liquid IV.
Absolutely. Liquid IV is a hydration multiplier. It's a powder and a packet, so you can take them with you wherever you go.
It's an electrolyte mix that you just add to your water. It delivers 2 to 2.5 more hydration than water alone.
So many flavors to choose from too. Grape, tropical punch, guava, passion fruit, strawberry.
Okay. Liquid IV has a ton of flavors. There is something for everyone. If you want your water to work harder for you, you should definitely try Liquid IV.
And for our listeners, if you go to their website, liquid-iv.com, and use code Arner Adventures, you can save 15% and get free shipping.
We'll link it in the show notes too. Liquid IV, fueling life's adventures.
Yeah, it was.
Wow.
It was a kind of a funny story. I'll fast forward. Our daughter's like 3 years old, and I was working nights as a police officer, and Duke was playing Connecticut for the national championship. So I recorded the game, and I was going to watch it later. And after Duke ends up losing to Connecticut after the game, Krzyzewski and William Avery have this big embrace. And, it's kind of on the one shining moment montage. And my daughter, 3 years old. So the next night after dinner, because she was watching the game with me, the next night after dinner, she's like, Dad, can we go watch The Hug? I'm like, The Hug? What are you talking about? She's like, The Hug. I'm like, what? With the basketball. Oh, okay. So we went and we watched the end of the game. And this went on for like 2 weeks. So I ended up writing Krzyzewski, and I'm like, hey, you probably don't remember me. You recruited me at West Point, blah, 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 blah. But I want to tell you the story about my daughter. And like 2 weeks later, I get a handwritten note from him basically saying, thanks for sharing that story with me. I get real close with my players. That was a tough loss and that kind of thing. That just gives you an idea of sort of the character that Krzyzewski had. He didn't have to write me back. I'm sure he gets thousands of letters every week, but that's just the kind of person he is.
Yeah, that's neat. I got a little personal story too. My dad is a huge Dookie, as big as this one. And he used to work the Duke Classic every year. And that's where they had like a tennis tournament he did it for 15 years, I think, and, raise money. And he used to be a line judge for the tennis games and that. So he really got to meet Mike every year. And he said what impressed him is he had met Mike, whatnot, came back a whole year later to do the work. And Mike said, hey, Jerry, how's it going? And he said, it's like, he remembers my name.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
But yeah, that's a similar,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh gosh. So, okay. So you have these books, these very successful books. So what your inspiration to start writing was just that you enjoyed it and you were, write these letters, but what made you go ahead and say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and write a book that is going to be published?
A lot of people had been suggesting that I write a book, and I was really kind of putting them off. I'm like, look, I'm not that kind of an author. I'm not that kind of a writer. And I think that's kind of, I think what God does is, he puts people, there's sort of that old joke, when you talk to God, it's called prayer. When God talks to you, it's called schizophrenia. So God has never talked to me. And, but what I think God does is put people in your path that make that same suggestion. Sorry, that was a bad joke.
That's a good joke.
That's really funny.
It's a great one. Let me jot that down.
You can use that. There you go. But what God does is put people in your path that keep making the same suggestion. And if you're smart enough, you'll kind of perk up and be like, well, maybe I had to, figure out that I should do this. I think it's God's way of saying, hey, dummy, I'm telling you what to do. Go ahead and do it. And so really the book for me was born out of two conversations that I had. One was with a former player that had moved to Colorado where my wife and I live with her fiance. And the four of us had dinner one night. And I remember after dinner saying to her, I'm really excited that you're living close and I can watch you find and live your purpose. And she got real quiet for a while. And then she looked at me and she's like, well, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I have no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Finding the reason you were put on the face of this earth and then living that reason. And then the second conversation was with a young man in college who had reached out to me on social media and asked me what I thought were the most important things he should learn to not just be successful in his job or in business, but to be successful in life. And I didn't want to give him the, get up early, work hard, help others. Not that those aren't important. They are incredibly important, but I wanted to see if I could go deeper with him. So I took some time and I used to walk around with a pad of paper and a pencil and I took notes. And eventually I had these 10 thoughts, these 10 ideas, these 10 principles. And so I sent them to him. And then I stepped back and I was like, well, I got a life story that fits underneath this principle, or I know somebody whose life emulates that principle. So literally during the 3-month period after I had my leg amputated and before I started chemotherapy for the tumors in my lungs, I sat down at the computer every day and I built stories, and they're real stories about real people underneath each of the principles. And that's how the book came to be.
So what about the 4 truths? How did they come to be?
The 4 truths aren't in the book. And this is kind of a funny story too. I was on a podcast with a woman who her podcast was titled something about, your truths or something like that. And she's like, well, you need to come to the podcast with your top 3 truths. And I was like, well, I've never thought about that. So it forced me to sort of codify those and write them down. And I had 3, and then I've added 1 since. So really, it was because I was on a podcast and this young lady sort of made me figure out what my 4 truths or my 3 truths were.
So will you tell us about your 4 truths?
Sure. So the 4 truths, I have them on a Post-it note right here on my desk. I see them multiple times during the day, so they constantly get reinforced in my mind. And they're just one sentence each. The first one is control your mind, or your mind is going to control you. The second one is embrace the pain and the difficulty that we all experience in life, and use that pain and difficulty to make you a stronger and more determined individual. The third one is the one I've most recently added, and it's more of a legacy truth. And it's this: what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people. And then the fourth one is, as long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. And so I kind of use those. I kind of sort of call them the bedrock of my soul. They're just a good place to sort of start to build a quality life off of.
I love all of them. Yeah, those are wonderful.
I do too. I read them and then I thought, okay, I want him to say them, because I feel like they're, it's so powerful when you could say it and we hear it from you.
From the source.
So when you were diagnosed with cancer, very first time, which to me, that one is the one that was on the bottom of your foot, right? How did you, how did you even recognize that? Were you having pain the first time, or was it something you did in a skin check, or how did that come to be?
So at the time I was a high school basketball coach, and I had a callus break open on the bottom of my left foot right below my third toe. And initially I didn't think much of it, because as a coach, you're on your feet a lot. But after a few weeks of it not healing, I made an appointment and went to see a podiatrist, a foot doctor, a friend of mine. And he took an x-ray and he said, Terry, I think you have a little cyst in there and I can cut it out. And he did. And he showed it to me. It was just a little gelatin sac with some white fat in it, no dark spots, no blood, nothing that gave either one of us concern. But fortunately or unfortunately, he sent it off to pathology to have it looked at. And then 2 weeks later, I received a call from him. And as I mentioned, he was a friend of mine. And the more difficulty he was having telling me what was going on, the more frightened I was becoming, until finally he just laid it out for me. He said, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years. I have never seen this form of cancer. You have an incredibly rare form of melanoma. Most of us think of melanoma as too much exposure to the sun, and it messes up the melon, the pigment in our skin. But this is a rare form that appears on the bottom of the feet or the palms of the hands, but it's still melanoma. And there's an even rarer form of melanoma that appears in your mucous membrane. So in your nose or your mouth or something like that, but it's still melanoma. And I kind of joked with them, not right away, because I was pretty much blown away. I never remember as a kid laying out in the sun with my feet up in the air, trying to tan the bottom of my feet. Yeah, but it has nothing to do with too much exposure to the sun. It's just one of those kind of rare forms that only idiots like me get.
God.
So, okay. So you then you undergo treatment, and then you found out, or at what point did you find out it was in your lymph nodes?
Pretty much right away. They do what's called a sentinel lymph node biopsy, where wherever the tumor is, they inject this radioactive kind of colored dye, and it travels up to your groin, and it lights up when it's taken up by whatever lymph nodes drain that area. And for people who don't understand what lymph nodes do, they're kind of like the sewer system of your body. They get rid of fluid and everything else that you've got in your body. And so these 3 lymph nodes lit up. And so when they took the tumor out of the bottom of my foot, they also took those 3 lymph nodes out and sent them to pathology. And one of them had a microscopic amount of cancer in it. So they recommended, during the second surgery where I had a skin graft on the bottom of my foot, they recommended that they take out all the lymph nodes. And that was pretty much a major surgery. I mean, my scar is pretty long. I had 40 staples in my groin, which that was a little tender.
And so then at what point did they suggest that, I guess the cancer came back, and then you ended up having your leg amputated below the knee, right? Or right above the knee?
Above the knee.
Okay.
Yeah. So after that, 2012, melanoma was pretty much a death sentence. They didn't really have anything that they could do to help you. So what they did is they put me on interferon, which I took a weekly injection of the drug interferon. And the side effects for me of interferon were that I had severe flu-like symptoms for 2 to 3 days every week after each injection. And I took those weekly injections for almost 5 years. So imagine having the flu every week for 5 years. And that wasn't a cure. That was, as my doctor used to say, we're trying to kick the can down the road and buy you more time. 5 years into the interferon, I ended up in the intensive care unit with a fever of 108 degrees because of the toxicity of the drug. That's usually not compatible with being alive. Fortunately, I was at a level 1 trauma center and they were able to stabilize me and send me to the ICU. I mean, part of what they did is pack me in ice and that. So I had to stop taking the interferon. And almost immediately after stopping it, the cancer came back in the exact same spot in my foot where it had presented 5 years earlier. That was 2017. 2018, I had my left foot amputated. Cancer worked its way at my leg. 2019, 2 more surgeries. And then in 2020, an undiagnosed tumor kind of at the end of what was left of my leg grew large enough that it fractured my tibia, my shin bone. And my only recourse right in the middle of the COVID pandemic was to have my left leg amputated above the knee. And I also found out I had the tumors in my lungs, which I'm being treated for now. So on that uplifting story.
Well, so does the cancer in your lungs relate to this other cancer?
Yeah, it's melanoma.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah, okay. Totally. It's just my doctors always said, when you found that tumor on the bottom of your foot, wherever the melanoma was in your body, it was already there. I mean, we just haven't been able to see it. And everybody thinks, with all the imaging that we have available to us, that, we can see everything. The problem is, even the most sensitive equipment, your tumor has to be the size of a garden pea in order for them to see it. And that's about 1 billion cells, cancer cells in that little tumor. So if it's something smaller than that, a lot of times they can't see it. So it has to grow to a point where they can see it on imaging.
How often do you have treatments now?
Every 3 weeks.
And is interferon still something that they use?
No. It was just at the time, it was the protocol. I was at MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, which is probably one of the, if not the best cancer hospital, maybe in the world, probably in the United States. And that was their protocol. That was what they wanted to put me on. And I remember one of my interferon is also used for hepatitis or some kind of liver issues. Okay. And one of my players' grandmother was on it because she had hep C. And I was talking to her about it before I went on it. And she's like, oh, yeah. She said, I was on it for 6 months. Yeah, it's not real good, but, you can handle it for 6 months. And so I went back to my oncologist. I'm like, okay, I'll do interferon. What are we figuring, about 6 months? And she was like, no, I'd like you to do it for 5 years. And I remember looking at her like, wait a minute. You want me to have the flu every week for 5 years? I'm like, you're nuts. That's just not something that's humanly possible. And she was like, do the best you can. It's like, okay.
Wow. Oh,
yeah, it was terrible. I mean, I was so sick of being sick that I literally, there were times I just prayed to die. It's like, we've all had the flu, but I mean, imagine you knew you were going to have it next week and the week after and the week,
Yeah.
And then there's like, where's the light at the end of the tunnel? So this episode is brought to you by Southern Oak Artisan.
We love Southern Oak Artisan. Their candles bring a really cool vibe to our bungalow.
They do. Southern Oak Artisan makes 100% natural soy candles that are not only aesthetically pleasing, and we love that they're in these, really cute little jars, reusable, by the way, but their clean scents are light and not overwhelming like other candles.
My favorite is the morning brew. Any time of day that smells good.
Mine is the lime, but no salt. Or maybe the Sommelier Chardonnay. Do you think there's a theme going with me there?
Oh, maybe. They have really great scents to choose from. They are only made with the highest quality ingredients, so they aren't toxic like a lot of candles are. 100% natural soy, clean fragrance oils. You just feel good with the air in your home being clean while burning these candles.
Yes. Well, for our listeners, we have a discount code. It is Adventure, and it will save you 10% off of your order at southernoakartisan.com or their Etsy shop. We're going to link it for you in the show notes too.
Southern Oak Artisan, curating something a little bit extra. It's the Southern way.
So my question now is this mindset, this mindset that you've had and you definitely have now. when you got off of that, were you just like, okay, like I can, literally breathe, and I'm going to be able to now just focus on, being well? Did it sort of shift back because you were able to kind of get rid of that sickness?
It did. I mean, when you've done something for 5 years continuously, even being sick, it was sort of a habit.
Yeah.
I was sort of used to it. My body was sort of used to it. And when I went off it, it was like, wow. So this is what healthy feels like. This is, and that was kind of, it took me some time to adjust to it. It didn't stay that way for very long, because I eventually got to that point, where I had the 108-degree fever, had to come off it. And like I said, almost immediately the cancer came back in the exact same spot on my foot. And so it was just like, well, that was 5 years of hell that really, I guess it bought me time, because now I'm on a clinical trial drug now that does nothing to the cancer. It's not chemo. It's not where it goes in and kills the tumor. What it does is, the way cancer proliferates in the body is that it secretes an enzyme, a protein that hides itself from your immune system. And what this drug does is goes in and wipes out that protein, that enzyme, so that your immune system can say, oh, wait a minute, that doesn't belong here. Let's go attack it. So it's your own body that's actually defending it, as opposed to chemo, where it's really not your body. It's just sort of the shotgun approach of, well, we're going to kill all fast growing cells, which will be cancer, but it'll also be your hair and your intestines and all that kind of stuff, which is why you lose your hair and have all the other problems you have.
Yeah. How do you feel physically?
Lousy most of the time, because I'm on this drug. I get it. I go to the hospital every day for a week. I get this drug. I have a very, and my doctor attributes to being on the interferon that my body kind of knows what to do. It kind of revs up, and it's like, oh, okay, let's use this drug. Let's go. And so I shake very violently. Imagine like being cold and shivering, multiply that times 10, but I'm not cold. And then I throw up, I have a headache. So I do that every day. And then I get 2 weeks off to basically regroup. And I've been doing that for 2 years now. I am what my doctor calls stable. I started this treatment, this clinical trial, with 2 other people. They unfortunately passed away last year from their disease. So I'm sort of the last man standing. And, it's always fun for me. I enjoy, MD Anderson sends me a letter every year from their tumor registry. And they're like, circle one of these 3. You're alive without cancer, you're alive with cancer, or you're dead. And I, just to tick them off, I keep hanging around. So, it's like, yeah, I got cancer, but I'm still here. I send it back to them. So,
oh my gosh. And, I know our audience can't see you, but they can hear you. And I think even in your voice, I'm not saying this out of ignorance. I'm just kind of saying it to make a point. You seem like such a strong person, strong-willed, strong. You probably are strong-willed and strong mindset, but physically you sound and look like a strong person. You would never know, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That's what I was thinking too. Your demeanor and you obviously have a great sense of humor about all this, and you just seem to light up and smile and laugh a lot when you're talking about things that are kind of tough to talk about.
Yeah. How do you stay physically strong? Do you exercise, or do you have the strength for that?
I don't so much anymore. I'm kind of confined to a wheelchair. I do have a prosthetic leg, having an amputation above the knee, trying to walk again. I'm 6'8", so falling is not an option. You get hurt when that happens. I was able to walk my daughter down the aisle last October for her wedding, which was, that was my goal. That's what I wanted to do. But I'm usually so tired and beat up that, doing things like this, being on podcasts with you and stuff like that, it gives me a purpose. And having a purpose gives me motivation and energy. And I remember when my dad, I mentioned my dad was sick and dying of cancer when I graduated from college. He had end-stage breast cancer back in the 1980s, which for a man, they didn't really know what to do with that kind of cancer. And so they pretty much told him to go home and die. And he lived another 3.5 years. And I believe he did because he had a purpose. He was in real estate, and he went to work up to 2 weeks before he died. And I sort of remembered that and sort of tucked it in the back of my mind, like, when it's my turn in the barrel here, I need to not be the person who's laying around in bed and thinking about how sorry, my life is. And don't get me wrong. I mean, you're looking at me right now. There's no S on my chest. I don't wear a cape and fly around with magical powers. I have bad days. I have days when I cry. I have days when I get down. I have days I feel sorry for myself. But when I do, and I'm going to tell you a story about rats now. So just hang with me. But there really is a good story. So I remember back reading this article back in the 1950s. There was a professor at Johns Hopkins University who did an experiment with rats. And he took rats and he put them in a tank of water that was over their head. And he wanted to see how long the average rat could tread water before they drowned. And the average rat treaded water for about 15 minutes. And just as the rats were getting ready to drown, he reached in, grabbed them, pulled them out, dried them off, and let them rest for a while. And then he put the exact same rats in that exact same tank of water. And the second time around, those rats treaded water on average for 60 hours. Now think about that. 15 minutes. I'm just not going to fail. I'm going to die. And the second time around, 60 hours, which said to me two things. Number one, the importance of hope in our lives. We have to believe that maybe not this week, maybe not this month, maybe not even this year, but at some point in time, our life will get better. And the second thing is just how much more our physical bodies can handle than we ever thought they could. I mean, I think everybody has a breaking point, but I think that breaking point is so much further down the road than we ever thought that it really was. And when I was in college, there was one of the presidents when I was at the Citadel was a man by the name of James Stockdale. I don't know if that name rings a bell.
It sounds familiar to me.
It does sound familiar to me too.
James Stockdale was Ross Perot's running mate for president when Ross Perot ran for the presidency.
Okay.
And Stockdale was a Medal of Honor winner. He was shot down over Vietnam and was in the Hanoi Hilton for like 8 years and won the Medal of Honor. And I remember somebody asked him, who made it out of that prisoner of war camp? Who made it out of all that torture and pain? And he said, it wasn't the big, tall, strong, tough guys. He said they ended up breaking because, eventually you're going to have so much physical pain you can't handle it. He said it wasn't even the optimist. It wasn't even the person that was like, hey, we're going to be rescued by Christmas, and so, well, Christmas would come and they weren't rescued. And then that person would get down and depressed and they would die. He said the person that survived that was the person that realized that they could control, or they could control what they could control. And he said for us, it was basically our thoughts and our breathing. That was the only two things we had any control over. And if you understood that and you controlled those things, you would survive that. It wasn't the big macho guys. It wasn't the, I'm going to be able to handle this, going back to mindset. It was the understanding that you could control what you could control.
I've read something like that too, and it was regard to a Nazi prison camp where this one fella was more of a sensitive type of person, but did a lot better than some of what looked like the more able-bodied people. And the explanation is because somebody like that, people like that's more sensitive. Maybe they're introverted. They've developed more of a lot more inner worlds. They have just developed things over their lives to survive, inner worlds, and they're that make them stronger than some of the more robust types. If that makes sense.
It does, totally.
Have either of you seen the movie Life is Beautiful about somebody who was a Nazi prison camp?
I have not seen it. No.
It's very good, but Roberto Benigni's in it. But it kind of reminds me of that. And I'll just tell you the synopsis is that his son, and his wife are all captured, and but he and his son stay alive throughout the film because he convinces his son, and he changes his mindset that says this is a game. It's all a big game, and we just have to get to the next step. We have to get to the next step and control the things that are going on right then. So it reminds me that what you said reminded me of it. And then what you just said reminded me of that. And it really is, mind over matter. Mindset is such a strong thing. We've talked about this before here, just with things that we've gone through physically or mentally. when you change the thought process and even just gratitude practice and look at the things that you have that are positive right now, it can get you through another day, usually.
Yeah. I mean, we all become what we think,
Yeah.
and if you think I can't do something, eventually your brain will wire itself to be like, yeah, we can't do that.
Yeah.
And so you've got to be really careful, with what's going through your mind. And I don't think people realize that. It's not till they get to it. Well, why can't I do that? Well, because you've been telling yourself you can't do it for 3 years. So of course you're not going to be able to do it.
Yeah. So if you were telling someone, and I know that you do coaching and all of that, but if you're telling someone, okay, about their mindset, and that's a big question, but is there sort of a, I don't know, like a mantra or something that you tell people, look, this is the way that you should approach things? Or if you could have one lesson, I guess I should say, if you were telling someone how to change that in their mindset.
I think, and I do get that question, not a lot, but, from some people, how do you go from being a person who's a glass half empty to being a person who's a glass half full?
Yeah.
And what I always tell people is, first of all, it's not going to happen overnight. You're just not going to wake up and you're going to be like, hey, I'm Mr. Positive all the time. I think the Cleveland Clinic did a study and said on any given day, we have 60 to 70,000 thoughts that pass through our mind, many of which we don't even pay attention to.
Yeah.
But what I learned early in that whole, the 4 truths of controlling your mind, when I was in high school, I had 3 knee surgeries. And I remember when I went back playing after those knee surgeries, my brain was putting all kinds of negative thoughts into my mind. Things like, oh, you're probably a step slower and coaches aren't going to be interested in recruiting you. And I remember thinking, wait a minute, I'm still playing at an elite level and coaches are still reaching out about the possibility of coming to play for their school. I realized I had to change that narrative. So that's what I tell people. It's like, first of all, we're human beings. I don't care how positive you are. I don't care, how David Goggins you are. David Goggins every now and then has a negative thought. I'll guarantee he'd tell you that.
I know, 100%.
Yeah. So it's okay to have negative thoughts. It's okay to do that. But you have to recognize they're there, and then you have to switch it. You have to change it to something that's more positive, more beneficial for you. And if you do that over time, eventually your brain will start to change where it will start to expect or start to see the good things, the positive things, the beneficial things that are happening in your life, and not so much of the negative things. So that's what I tell people. Don't get too excited when you have those negative thoughts. They happen to all of us, but realize that it's there, change it to something positive, and over time, you will become a much more positive individual.
Is that, well, I guess that leads me to my last question for you. Can you tell us about the Sustainable Excellence membership? And is that some of the things that are into play when in that membership?
It is. And, again, going back to kind of writing the book, people would read the book or they'd hear me on a podcast or see me speak in person. They're like, well, we want to kind of go deeper, with the sustainable excellence, each of the principles. And I was like, I'm in treatment and I don't know if I can do that. But again, enough people, kind of God saying, hey, dummy, I'm telling you to do something else again. Pay attention here. And so I started really kind of last summer in June, this membership program, and it's videos, on-demand videos that you can get. It's weekly group coaching calls with me and other people, and and this is the thing that I found interesting. And it's a community where you can sort of get together with like-minded leaders and professionals and sort of bounce things around. Hey, I'm thinking about doing this. How did you do that? Not that the other stuff isn't good. It is. But I think where people get the most benefit is where they get together with like-minded people and they start bouncing stuff off of each other about how they were successful or what they did, where they failed, so these people can't do it. So the membership is really kind of really follows along with the book that I wrote. And it's something that it's fun for me now to kind of, and I worked with somebody to help me put it together, but just to listen to people, to kind of listen in on some of those conversations and see what people are getting out of it.
Yeah, it's like a think tank for positive mindset and learning from other people and
Absolutely.
And it just seems the more people you have, the more it would just build the positivity
and elevate. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly it.
That's neat.
Well, let's get to your fast 5 questions.
Okay.
Oh, and the number 1 is definitely tailored for you.
Yeah. This is just a way to get to know you better. It's just fun, Okay, so number 1, stay hard or take souls?
Ooh. Take souls.
Okay. Taking souls.
Taking souls.
2,
yeah, I have a T-shirt that says "Taking souls." So
I know.
Yes, I have to say that. Yes.
I'm surprised you don't have one of the T-shirts.
I know.
And going on to number 2, sunrise or sunset?
Sunrise.
Mm-hmm.
I knew the day is all it's all there before you. What are you going to do with it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, number 3, would you rather go for a walk out in nature or like moving in nature, or would you rather relax in a hammock?
Well, I'd probably fall over if I tried to go for a walk, but
well, I was actually thinking when I wrote that, I was thinking that, I've seen you on Instagram and you're clearly standing. And so I thought, he either has a prosthetic and he still gets around. And so I wasn't sure about it, but
that's a good, it's always, like I said, I love to joke about this stuff. So I would still probably go for a walk in nature, just try to commune with it. And now I wouldn't pass up the hammock either, but I would probably go for a walk with nature.
Right.
And number 4, coaching or playing?
Boy, I miss playing. I'd have to say playing.
Yeah.
Okay,
and number 5, this is super serious. Ketchup or mustard?
So the healthy side of me wants to say mustard because it's got, turmeric in it, which decreases inflammation in the body. Yeah. So I would say that. But my taste buds would probably lean more towards ketchup. So
right. Okay.
And something about that question always gathers as much thought as any other.
It does.
It does. It's ridiculous, isn't it? It's like, really,
anytime, and we ask it a lot, and not everybody, but a lot. But when we do ask it, it is the most thought about question.
I know.
It's crazy.
Oh my God. Like,
which one?
I gotta have a minute.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I'll get back to you on that one, right?
Yeah. Okay, and the question we ask everyone is, what does a life well lived mean to you, Terry?
Can I tell you a story?
Yeah.
Okay. Always been a big fan of Westerns growing up. When I was young, my mom and dad used to let me stay up late and watch, Bonanza, Gunsmoke. My favorite was Wild Wild West. Jerry's shaking his head like, yeah. 1993, the movie Tombstone came out.
I love Tombstone.
Yeah. Starred Val Kilmer as a man by the name of John Doc Holliday. Kurt Russell as a man by the name of Wyatt Earp. Now, Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp were 2 living, breathing human beings who walked on the face of the earth. They're not just made up characters for the movie. Now, Doc was called Doc because he was a dentist by trade, but pretty much Doc Holliday was a gunslinger and a card shark. And Wyatt Earp, most of his adult life, had been some form of a lawman. And somehow these 2 men from entirely opposite backgrounds come together and form this very close friendship. And at the end of the movie, Doc Holliday is dying of tuberculosis at a sanitarium in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, which is about 3 hours from where I live. The real Doc Holliday died at that sanitarium. He's buried in the Glenwood Springs Cemetery. Wyatt, at this point in his life, is destitute. He has no money. He has no job. He has no prospects for a job. So every day he comes to play cards with Doc, and the 2 men pass the time that way. And in this almost last scene in the movie, they're talking about what they want out of life. And Doc says, when I was younger, I was in love with my cousin, but she joined a convent over the affair. But she's all that I ever wanted. And then he looks at Wyatt and he says, what about you, Wyatt? What do you want? And Wyatt kind of nonchalantly says, I just want to lead a normal life. And Doc looks at him and says, there's no normal, there's just life, and get on with living yours. Shannon and Jerry, we probably all know people that are, sitting back and saying, well, when this happens, I'll have a normal life. When this occurs, I'll have a successful life. When this arises, I'll have a significant life. What I'd like to leave your listeners with is this. Don't wait. Don't wait for life to come to you. Get out there, find the reason you were put on the face of this earth, use your unique gifts and talents, and live that reason. Because if you do, at the end of your life, I'm going to promise you two things. Number one, you're going to be a whole lot happier. And number two, you're going to have a whole lot more peace in your heart.
Oh, gosh.
That was wonderful.
Well, Terry, I think you are. I think you're doing that. I think
I'm trying.
Your books, everything that you do with the membership, being on here, telling your story. I feel like when you said earlier about telling the former player, about finding, what it is that, about living the life that kind of what you just said. I was thinking
living your purpose.
I was thinking, well, Terry's doing that, which is great that you're able to talk the talk, but also walk the walk.
Walk the walk. I like it.
Well, Terry,
or wheel the walk, whichever you prefer.
Wheel the walk. Yeah. Please tell our audience where, of course, they can find you, where they can find your books, where they can get connected with the membership, the whole works.
Yeah, Sustainable Excellence is pretty much available anywhere you can get a book online, Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, Apple iBooks, wherever you get your book online, you can get Sustainable Excellence. I have a blog called Motivational Check. Every day I put up a thought for the day, and with that thought comes a little bit of a question about how maybe you could apply that thought into your life. On Mondays, I put up the Monday morning motivational message, which a lot of times is a video or story that I find online that I think has merit with people. And you can leave me a message there. You can get access to the book there. You can get my social media links there. You can also get recommendations I have for other books to read, videos to watch. So motivationalcheck.com will get you to me.
And that will also have the membership?
It does. The membership is on there as well.
Okay. Oh, I cannot thank you enough. I think this definitely, changed me. And again, it's just another nudge towards positive mindset that I think we both need. But
my thought was I'm going to carry a lot of this with me.
Yeah.
Through the next days, weeks.
Yeah.
And then with the help of the blog and all that too,
yeah.
we can kind of sustain
and all of your resources. Yeah. We're going to link all of those down in the show notes. But Terry, we cannot thank you again enough for being here.
Well, thank you for having me on. I always say it's nice people like you that allow me to come on and have a conversation with them, and hopefully that conversation makes a positive difference in somebody's life. And if it does, today's been a good day.
Yeah. Well, wishing you the best of the rest of your day.
Thank you very much. The same to both of you.
Wow, that talk with Terry was one of the more motivational, inspiring ones we've ever had.
It really was. We read his story. We knew it was going to be a motivational one. Of course, motivational check, how appropriate. But, we recorded this on a Saturday morning, I believe.
Yep.
And it was like you say, Jer, a lot of the times that it was like he was sitting here in our home and we were having him over for coffee. And it was just so lovely. I mean, what a great way to, first of all, start your day. What a great way to, just kick off a great mood for a weekend. But, if you're listening to this now, it's probably a weekday. And hopefully it really inspired you and got you going on your day.
Well, and I think it would. His story is just amazing. And it did set a great tone for our Saturday, our weekend. And not only is it a motivating story, it's really interesting because the guy has such a diverse background in his career, or careers, I should say.
Yeah.
And the things he's overcome have just been amazing.
Yeah.
And with all that, he's just such a good humored person. And like many others we've met, you realize what he did to overcome or keep overcoming all this adversity is just to have such a great positive mindset and good sense of humor.
It always comes back to mindset. Always.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. I know that seems to be, and I don't know if we intended it from the beginning, but an underlying theme. We
really did not intend that, but it really has turned into just all about this great positive mindset through challenges. So
yeah, it really has. Well, if this episode resonated with you, or if you know of someone who would benefit from a story like Terry's, we would love it if you would share it, send the link, screenshot it, or just tell someone about this inspirational conversation you heard on the Arner Adventures podcast. We would appreciate, and we know that Terry would as well.
as always, you can find us at arneradventures.com, on Instagram at arneradventures, also linked in the show notes.
So until next time, enjoy the journey that you're on. We're wishing you lots of adventures.
Bye.